Here is Jerry Pennick, the director of the Federation's Land Assistance Fund.
We see right now there's going to have to be a part 1, 2, and 3. I usually get on John by going on and on his reports, but you had my attention tonight, John. I have to give it to you. I learned a lot from your discussion. And as much as you write, John, I know you've written some of this down. I know you have, huh? All right, okay, because somebody's going to write our history if we don't write it. So somebody else is going to write it. And Carol, I can understand why everybody left, but on that Garden of Eden, we need to go back to the future. Not moving out here. Now, I don't want people to move out here on trailers.
Not a bad idea.
But I'm talking about that training that we had before, those demonstration projects and all of that. We need to do a lot more of that. And then there's one other thing that I don't know who caught it or not, but there's one unique thing that John, Ralph, and Carolyn talked about, is that most of us, if not all of us, were under 30. We were all young people during this period, except Ralph.
I was a baby. I was 30.
But we were all under 30. Even Charles, as executive director, he was under 30. Everybody was under 30. So that's a challenge to the young people to take the baton, and it's a challenge to the old people to turn it loose. But we can't turn it loose unless somebody is willing to take it. But that's one thing I tell everybody. I tell Cornelius that. I tell everybody all the time that we were all under 30s when we were doing this. Everybody was under 30. Everybody was. But see, that's another thing we have too. We have our own time. We have our own time. We don't go by traditional time. That's where we're getting to now. But that's going to, like I said, that's going to take a longer. So we're going to have a part 2. We're going to have a part 2. But briefly, though, you have the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. The Land Assistance Fund was the Emergency Land Fund initially. Just like the Federation, the Emergency Land Fund got its start also in Atlanta. But at Clark Atlanta University is where it first got started. But even before then, about 5 years ago, I had a fellowship to do a writing project, so I started doing some research on the Emergency Land Fund. And I found out that back in the early 1960s, there was a conference held in Detroit, Michigan. And out of that conference came the Black Manifesto. And from the Black Manifesto, it demanded like $200 million for African Americans in the rural South to develop co-ops, to form a land bank, and to do other things. That didn't come through naturally. They didn't get that. But then a later meeting was held at Clark Atlanta University, and that was held really by the Black Economic Research Center, Dr. Robert S. Brown, who was the head of the Black Economic Research Center. And I think at that time he may have been the only African-American economist in the country, black economist in the country. And we had a meeting at Clark Atlanta University, and some of the people from the conference in Detroit came to that meeting. And they wanted to focus then on land as an economic development tool and to save African American owned land. So they needed to find out exactly how much land was owned by African Americans, where it was owned, and how it was held. So the Black Economic Research Center commissioned a study to go out and do this kind of research in the South. And the name of that study was Only 6 Million Acres. That was the first in-depth study of African American owned land in the country that had ever been done. And at the end, that's what you found, that blacks owned only 6 million acres at that time in the late 1960s, from a high of 15 million acres in the early 1900s. So we had lost over half of our land ownership over that period of time. In that study, it also gave recommendations of what needed to be done, how to deal with the situation, how to turn it around. And with an anonymous gift at that time of $1 million that was given to Dr. Brown, he decided to form an organization. He called it the Emergency Land Fund. And from the Emergency Land Fund, he came down, hired staff in the same states with the Federation is. The Federation is more economic development. The Land Fund was just land retention, basically saving black-owned land through legal assistance and financial assistance. Those are the two things we had. We also had a revolving loan fund at the time, where we would go in and, if land was being lost through a tax sale or petition sale, we would go in and lend the owner the money. They could bid on the land and save the land that way. One of the first employees was Michael Figures, who was later became a state senator here in Alabama from Mobile. Hank Sanders was on the board. So you remember Hank Sanders? He's been here a lot. He was on one of the first board members. His wife was one of the attorneys that we worked with, Rose Sanders. Alvarez Farrellette from Louisiana, the late Alvarez Farrellette, Fred Bennett from here in Alabama. These